Okay. We are reporting.
So I assume these meetings are the third Thursday of every month. Is
Yeah.
that a good assumption?
That's right,
Yes.
yes.
It looked like there may have been
Nice to meet
a
you.
time or two where it
Hi, buddy.
didn't happen, but
There was a time or two, usually in the summer.
yeah.
I told him,
But
I
I will
like a tidy meeting, with Steve,
update
but in
you
particular today on
make sure you're
kickoff
on
of
the
March
recurring
Madness.
calendar
Yeah,
for
I'm
this
afraid the
one
executive
and for
session
the
might
communications.
Yeah.
keep us from setting a
Yeah.
record.
That's okay.
and that would be the third Tuesday.
And we've got Steve's
This
presentation
is
of the
a
pumping numbers.
holiday for me, so I actually have taken the first half day off.
Well, you just came in for this?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you were a champion. We
Yeah.
appreciate you
Well, I
prioritizing
knew we
it.
were gonna have executive session, so I didn't wanna zoom in.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here for that.
Gonzaga.
25-3.
Gonzaga.
Big
Holy
pieces tearing up
cow,
roads and-
25-3 right
That's all
now?
I got here. So
Yeah. no,
Wow, man, they're not messing around. You know, I think Gonzaga could make some noise this year. They really came on at the end of the season. I think they've got a good roster to make some noise.
Any given day, they can beat anyone.
Anybody, yeah, if they're playing right, I was
Because
at,
they have that extra Razorback starting, I'll just say there, who is the top free throw shooter in the country.
well, I mean, that's something.
So.
I went to the WSU Gonzaga game and man, they looked good.
And they were just relaxing too.
Mhm. Yeah, I wasn't going hard. Okay, let me
Sorry,
start.
Jeff.
No, it's March.
No,
I'm just waiting for the NAIA World Series, so.
you might want to give them that, but we do have a four.
So it's
I'm
basketball
gonna give it
stuff.
just a second. Let's see, we got one on.
I like listening to
You
baseball.
might want to,
More of a nice hockey
yeah,
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna watch
For a
sports.
second.
My wife abhors any violence. She loves ice hockey.
here's a note, thing
Go
I
figure.
added.
That's not violent.
Was that on mine as well?
Yeah.
Old joke, I went to a fight.
Well,
No,
congratulatory.
it's for you to know about.
well, I didn't know-
Kind of a congratulatory situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody gone.
Thanks for adding that, Mike.
Anybody north of, yeah.
I had help. Yeah.
I think
Don't worry about it.
Did you watch the Four Countries tournament?
I did.
That was interesting.
It was.
The hockey tournament?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something else, huh? I started playing hockey this year. I've never played before and, man, that's a fun sport to play.
Man,
Those guys are amazing.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
Just
playing
high
now,
energy
like, I
all the
mean,
time.
obviously I'm not even good. I'm barely learning how to like be in position and skate. But like, you realize just how good they are. Like that
Physical.
technical prowess, just the ability to skate like that while
Switch
keeping track. It's so
directions.
fast. And like, just the coordination that requires for like flipping forward and backward and the puck
I have
handling and the
one of
passing.
little
and
sister skaters while I'm up there. Don't hit me.
Okay, we
me-
got
Used to not like it that much.
Chris has
Never
joined
thought
us.
it Was on the TVs, but the TVs now.
It's gotten better. It used to be, because it used to be live hockey was one of my favorite sports to
Yeah,
watch
right.
live, but you just couldn't follow it on TV.
Yeah. It just looked like they were skating some weird dance that you didn't know the choreography to.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting
Somebody
it.
missed it.
Michelle, Haley,
Pretty good following online.
Haley, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
Jeff, have you been our new county commissioner?
I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off. All right,
Meet you, Chad Wetzel. Chad, Jeff,
Uh,
nice to meet you.
we are 2 minutes past the hours. We're gonna go ahead and kick the meeting off. Appreciate everybody coming to our March Pollution Space and Aquifer meeting. I had the opportunity to go back and look through some historical records and some preparation, and man, that's a lot of agendas over the years. It's a real tribute to how much work has gone into this, and I think Mark Story's name was on almost every single one of them.
So,
You and Paul, man. It's incredible.
Paul and I have got a lot of years here.
A lot of years, my friend. Anyway, gonna kick it off. I know it's pretty much a holiday for a lot of people today with the kickoff of the tournament. So we'll try and run as tidy a meeting as we can. We do have an executive session that we'll go into recess for, as part of today's meeting. So at the point that we go into the executive session, we'll just ask for the board members to stay in the room for that conversation, and then we'll reconvene, to adjourn the meeting. So we'll start off with some introductions. I'm Tyler Palmer. I am the City of Moscow staff representative of the Pollution Space and Aquifer Committee and the current PBAC chair. And let's start going this way.
Rusty Vineyard, Director of Facilities here at the University of Idaho and the UI representative.
Great.
Eileen McCall, community activist.
Chad Wetzel, the new Whitman County Commissioner.
And welcome. This is Chad's first meeting. We're happy to have you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Mark Story, Whitman County Public Works.
Jeff Lanigan, WTU Facility Services and Vice Chair.
Eric Gislani, Water Conservation Project Coordinator, AC and PCEI.
Great.
And I'm Mike Popel, Executive Director for PBAC.
All right, let's finish in the room, then we'll hop online.
David Hall, longtime Lake Tahoe County resident.
And David's been in as many meetings at least as I have, and almost as many as Mark probably. Let's hop online. Let's start with Councilor Lewis.
Hi guys, my Wi-Fi is not great, so I'll keep my video off, but I'm Haley. I am the City of Moscow's council liaison, I guess voting board member for the year, and I've been asking for it for 3 years, so I get it for my last year on this term. So happy to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Councilor Weller.
Nathan Weller, Pullman City Council rep.
Welcome. Michelle. Michelle, you're not muted, but we're not hearing you.
Microphone's not on. But Michelle is with the Idaho Department of Water Resources. She's
our regional manager.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Council
Wait,
Lamar?
Wait, sorry, Tyler, I wanted to ask
Commissioner Lamar?
Michelle, are you based in Coeur d'Alene or are you based in Lewiston?
Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, awesome.
Commissioner Lamar. See him on there.
I'm trying to speak. I'm driving to Lewiston, so I'm online. But yeah, Tom Lamar, Lake Tahoe County Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamar. Let's see, Lana.
University of Idaho, Water Resources Research Scientist.
Great, thank you. Steve.
Steve Robichon, PBAC Technical Advisor.
Great, thanks, Steve. Colt.
Colt Shelton with JUB Engineers.
And Chris.
Chris Beard, Department of Ecology Water Resources Program.
Thanks, Chris. Luke.
Source Water Protection Specialist with Idaho Rural Water Association.
Great, welcome, Luke. Kara.
Kara Haley, City of Pullman.
Welcome, Kara. Let's see, Meg.
Hi, this is Meg Wolf. I'm with the Idaho Water Resources Research Institute, IWERI.
Great, welcome, Meg. Diane. Diane, you're not muted, but we're not hearing you.
Oh, there's Sean.
So we'll go on to Sean. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself while we got you?
Sure, why not? Sean Wells, Public Works Director, City of Pullman.
Good to see you, Sean.
You too.
All right, what I'd like to do now is we have got some additional guests online today that I'll let introduce themselves. As you all know, we've been going through the RFQ process, and we conducted interviews with the subcommittee assigned for the selection of a consultant to take the next step with our water alternative supply study, to take a look at the Clearwater diversion. HDR was the firm that was selected, and we've got some representatives from that firm and some of the folks that they're going to be working with on our project. So I'm going to kick it over to Jeff Hansen, who will be their lead for the project, and allow him to introduce himself and his team.
All right. Thanks so much, Tyler. And thanks to everyone. Jeff Hansen here, project manager with HDR. The HDR team is very pleased to be selected to support you on the Clearwater work. Just a fascinating project. We're really excited to get into it. And today we're just listening and getting caught up with all of your activities. And we're currently in the scoping phase of scoping out the details of our work. And unfortunately, I can only be here for about 15 or 20 minutes, but a couple of my key team members are here too, and I'll let them introduce themselves. First of all, Scott King. Scott, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Scott King, engineer project manager with HDR.
And then Anna Morandi.
Hi, folks. Really nice to meet you. Sorry, weird lighting. I'm not in my usual home office. But yeah, Anna Morandi. I'm a senior resilience planner with HDR, and I'm also a facilitator, and I'll be leading the stakeholder engagement portion. So really excited to engage with you all and meet you all, and to see many of you all again. So thanks for having me.
There's a phone number there.
And Scott?
Yeah, I did say something, but I'll say it in. Scott King, engineer with HDR Engineering. I'll be working lead on the water supply assessment and the water rights for the work at PBAC.
Perfect. Well, we're really excited. As Jeff mentioned, we're going through the scoping and budget process right now. The committee will review that, and then we will be moving that forward to Moscow City Council for approval, as those funds from IDFWR are granted through a governmental entity in the state of Idaho. And so, yeah, we're really excited. That's going to be really fun. Thank you all. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Gonna do just a couple. We've had a couple more folks join us. Daniel, you want to do an intro?
Oh, hi everyone. This is Daniel Sturs from Idaho Department of Water Resources.
And we've also had Jake join us.
Yes, good afternoon. Jake Geringer, Special Assistant and North Idaho Liaison in the Governor's Office.
Great. Thanks, Jake. All right. Well, we got a full house, especially online, and really appreciate everybody's participation in exciting times. And we've got a lot of things to get through and some exciting things on the agenda. So we'll go ahead and dive in. The first item on the agenda that we've got after introductions is the approval of our February meeting minutes that Mike distributed.
Move to approve. They look great.
Got a motion from Haley. I've got a second from Rusty. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes from our February meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment for any items that aren't on the agenda. Open the floor for anybody who has anything that they need to share. Going once, twice, hearing none. Our fourth item is unfinished business, which we do not have any for this month. And so we will get into the meat of the agenda, which is our new business. The first item under our new business is the vote for a contract with Alta Science and Engineering for our 2025 data logger download from the Pollution Basin Groundwater Well Network. Just as a reminder to everyone, this is a really critical component of PBAC's work. It's been a long-term activity. Having a good data set and being able to make data-driven decisions is just one of the most critical things we do, especially as we get into these phases where we're talking big money for big projects. Having the ability to better understand what's going on in our basin is really crucial, and this is something that PBAC has done and done well for a long time. And so this is just to continue to maintain that network of monitoring wells that we have so that we can monitor the levels in the aquifer and have a good and continuous data set.
I believe it's also in our interlocal agreement. That's actually one of the few things that's embedded in there, something we will do as part of our agreement.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely true, Mark. Thank you. That this is something that we have agreed to contractually. And so this is something that Alta Science and Engineering has supported us in the data gathering aspect of this work since I believe 2018, at least 2019. It's been several years. They've done a really good job. They've become very familiar with our network and with our loggers and with that data download and processing. So Mike included in the packet the proposed contract. Mike, is there anything you want to mention about the contract? Any new aspects that you want to bring up?
The terms and conditions are the same as we've agreed in the past. The cost is reduced because they worked on reducing the cost. So last year it was $16,000, including a couple of extra data logger replacements. This contract is $12,000 with a contingency of $4,000 in case
something dies.
In case something dies or something gets tangled up and you can't get it out of the well. And I do feel, as Tyler said, that the the continuity of the same folks doing it is important to the data set, because the data set just keeps getting bigger and more important. And then if we approve this, this will go to UI for execution and management on our behalf.
Does anybody have any questions for Mike about the proposed contract?
My only question, Mike, it's great to hear that Alta was game to, well, I have two questions. One, when you say the total proposal is reduced, the contract is reduced, was that at our request, or was that just Alta doing A+ work trying to further refine the project and processes?
I requested it, Haley. So the way Alta structures it is Kyle Duckett was doing it for several years. And he got promoted a few times and his rate went up. And I said, Kyle, you're awesome, but your rate really went up. So actually, one of the reasons they hired staff was to help us reduce the cost of this. So the person who did it this year is Mickey, who was she's been at our last.
And she
Yeah.
presented, okay, I missed the context, and that's awesome. And it sounds like it's a great learning experience and good scope for a project for someone entering the field. So I didn't know the context. That's awesome.
So it's so Kyle is now a professional geologist, and this is not professional geologist work, but this is skilled work. You gotta, there's a lot you have to know. So Kyle trained her and she's ready to go. And the cost went down.
That's awesome. Well, kudos to Alta and the crew for, and you, Mike, and all for, being mindful of the expense. And if the scope isn't adjusted, I don't have any concerns. And it's great to see that we've got a local to the Palouse entity who can do this work for us. So I'm happy to put forth a motion unless there's other questions.
Does anyone else have any questions? Motion away, Counselor.
I move to approve the contract, sorry, let me pull up the agenda language, with Alta Science and Engineering for 2025 data logger downloads from Palouse Groundwater Basin Well Network. Well Network says twice, but yeah, Well Network.
Second from Sean Wells.
Okay, just for the record, if we can have the motion, amend the motion to include that the contract for $12,562 with a $4,000 contingency as presented.
Friendly amendment accepted. That sounds great.
And second, okay with that.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor in a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Our sincere thanks to Alta for their continued work on this. We really appreciate that continuity. Okay, and so as a natural segue, we are getting on to one of, I think, everybody's favorite annual reports, which is our pumping and well level report that Steve Robichon has given. I don't know how many times, Steve, many times. And so we are excited to see that. So we are going to give Steve the floor and let him take us through what last year looked like.
I'm trying to share it with you now. Maybe it's this one. No, I think it's this one. Do you have the screen, Steve?
Let me see. It's not sharing is not turned on.
Oh, maybe I need to actually push the share button. Let's try it now.
Okay, let's see.
We see the Zoom screen.
Okay, let's see if I can get to where I need to go.
Yeah, I think there we go.
I may have shared the wrong screen.
We shared our screen. We need to.
I just make him co? and
Yeah,
then
that's
have him share
one
screen?
of the easiest ways to
There
do
you
it.
go. Like you're a co-host, Steve.
Yay.
And then you're gonna need to stop our share so that he can share his.
Okay.
There we go.
Zoom savants.
Can anybody see the screen yet?
Yeah.
Not on our end yet, Steve.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tyler. Anyway, I think that this is probably the 20th time I've done this.
So I
Steven,
would have had red hair when you started doing this.
I would have had hair when you started doing this.
Steve, the life hack is in the Zoom window, you're looking for the green share button.
Okay, I'll go back. I had tabbed over to the PowerPoint.
And I think we now all have the green button, and so
Okay, I want to share that.
There we go.
We good now?
Yep, we got it.
Yeah, there it is. Took them with fire.
We are tech geniuses today, my friends.
All right, thanks, Tyler. This is the 2024 pumping and water level presentation. What's going on here now? There we go. 2024 pumping. This breaks it down by entity. The total was 2.3 billion gallons. These Zoom screens get in the way of my PowerPoint, so I don't know that I'll be able to read what's down there. I think it's 1.7% less than it was in 2023.
That's what it's showing,
Yes,
Steve.
and we can see the full PowerPoint.
Okay, good. That makes you guys anyway. Come on. There we go. This breaks it down by percentages. So you see that Pullman and Moscow are the big pumpers, and then followed by WSU, and UI and Palouse are the smaller pumpers. If you break it out by pumping entity, 2024 versus 2023, in all these charts, the blue bars mean better or less pumping than normal. And when it comes to weather, it means cooler or wetter than normal. The red bars are more pumping, warmer, and drier. So you can see that Palouse was up a little bit from 2023. The rest of the entities were down. UI was down quite a bit because in 2023, they had issues with their wastewater reclamation, so they had to use their potable water to water some of the green spaces. They got that fixed in 24, so it looks like they used a lot less water, but it really is they got back on the treated wastewater again. This is the monthly pumping percentage by month. You can see that in the winter, in the fall and the spring, the pumping's pretty low, but then in the summer months when the irrigation's going on, over half of the pumping happens. So the June through September months are the most important for the pumping, and that's basically going to be dependent upon what the weather's like during that period. You can kind of try to tease out a little bit more from this percentage by month by taking an average of what's pumped in the winter and assuming that that's indoor water because there's not a lot of outdoor water being used during the winter. So you can draw a line across at that average level and consider everything below that line what's called baseline pumping, and then everything above that line. Oh, didn't come through. Let's see. Everything above the line, which isn't showing on my screen, is called non-baseline pumping. So baseline pumping is kind of equivalent to indoor pumping because you're going to be pumping that indoor water all year round. The non-baseline is primarily outdoor pumping. There we go. So when you look across the years from 2006 to 2024 and look at the baseline and the non-baseline pumping, you can see that the blue, which is baseline, that kind of has a slow but constant trend downward, which is kind of reflected by the amount of conservation keeping up or exceeding the amount of population change during that time. You can see that 2020 and 2021 were especially low, but those were COVID years. So you got to kind of throw those COVID years out when you're looking at this data. But when you get to the total with the stack bars, you see that there's a lot more variability in there. And that variability is due to the different weather conditions during the primary pumping season. So when it's hot and dry, there's going to be a lot more pumping and the red bar is going to be taller. Cool and wet, the red bar is going to be shorter. So when you look year to year, it generally pays off to look in the summer pumping and see what the summer weather was like to try to explain why the pumping was either higher or lower for the year. So when we look at 2024 temperature compared to 2023, you can see that May was a lot cooler than normal, but remember May, there's not a lot of pumping going on. And July and August, when a lot of pumping's going on, were a little bit warmer than normal, and September was quite a bit warmer than normal, but pumping's starting to tail off in September. June was cooler, pumping had picked up, but still not too high in June. You look at the precip for those same months, and you can see that June was wetter than normal. August and September were a little bit drier and a little bit wetter. But you got to keep in mind with this one that it usually doesn't rain very much in the summer anyway. So you can see like the number for June, it was less than half an inch more than it was in 2023. September 0.2 inches more than it was in 2023. So not a lot more or less rain than normal. So when you look at the temperature and the precipitation, and you think about the fact that the total pumping was down 1.7%, you kind of wonder what would drive that. And the only thing that might have driven it would be what happened in June, because June was both cooler and wetter. So even though June only has about 10 or 11% of the total pumping, it may have been enough to drive that change year round all the way down to the minus 1.7. So I looked at June a little closer. And this is a spreadsheet I get from the plant science farm in Moscow every month. And the leftmost column is the high temperature for each day of the month. And you can see there was a little spell of cool early in the month and then another spell kind of mid-month, but it was a pretty nice month in June of 2024. But when you look at precipitation, you can see it was dry most of the month with the exception of June 3rd. So on June 3rd, there's a big storm came through and it rained over an inch on the 3rd of June. And you can go out to the stream gauge at Paradise Creek and look at the stream gauge and see that sure enough, on June 3rd, a lot of water came through Paradise Creek on that day. Creek level rose quite a bit. When you look at the flow at Paradise Creek, again, you can see on June 3rd, there was a spike when that storm came through, but you can see that this black line is the 2024 curve. The gray line is 2023. And you can see that there was enough water in this storm to saturate the soil enough that it was giving back that water slowly to the stream all the way through into early July. So when you compare what was in the stream this year to what was in the stream last year, you see that there was a lot more water in the stream, which you can kind of translate as there being a lot more water in the soil. So the plants didn't need as much water to thrive. So it's
Steve,
probable.
can I ask you a quick question on that one?
Sure.
Have we looked at previous summertime concentrated precipitation events? Like, is that a pretty typical pattern for them to follow for it to slowly give back? I imagine just kind of saturating, hitting the clay layers and making its way to the creek. Is that a common thing for us to see with a high intensity precipitation event in the summertime?
Yeah, but we don't really have that many. There's very few high precipitation events in summertime. And
Gotcha.
it's a thing called baseline recession, but really the amount of rain that comes in the summer is not very high. So when you do get a good wetting, a good soaking of the soil, it's going to take a while to come out.
Gotcha.
This one looks all complicated, and what it is individual entity pumping by month compared to last year. So the bars that are below zero mean the pumping was less than in 2023. The bars that are above zero were more than in 2023. And you can see that in June, all of the entities pumped less than they did in 2023. And when you total them all up, it looks like it's about 15% less pumped in June during 2024 than 2023. So there's a good chance that a lot of that difference overall for the year 2024 came from that one rainstorm on June 3rd.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Sure.
You gave us the context for the how to mindfully process the U of I numbers. How do you know off the top of your head how 24 compared to 22 for some of those U of I figures? If U of I was facing a system improvement thing that they fixed and 23 kind of has some data outliers?
I didn't compare them this year, but in general, in a good year, UI gets about 100 million gallons of their total from wastewater reclamation. And sometimes it goes down to like 800 million gallons and sometimes or 80 million gallons, sometimes it gets up to 100 million gallons. And in 2023, they were down at about, I think, 40 million gallons. So they really lost a lot of water while the wastewater reclamation was down. And that was reflected in that 30-some% decrease that they
Yeah.
saw in 2024.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, one of the ways to kind of smooth out year-to-year variation in weather is to look at a 5-year trailing average. And instead of looking at 2023, if you look at the average of the previous 5 years, this is how the pumping breaks down by entity. And you can see, with the exception of Palouse, all the other entities were below that 5-year average. And one of the other things I look at with this is Pullman and Moscow generally kind of follow along the same trend in terms of total pumping. They're either both up or both down, or they're close to each other. And that's kind of what you would expect in the cities, because individual cities don't usually make big changes year to year. So when one of the cities is up, the other city is usually up. And when one's down, the other one's down. When there's a difference between the two cities, then I ask the question, what happened different in one of the cities than in the other city? And you'll see something coming up that shows this.
Steve, I'm gonna interject that I don't know, I know your ears to the ground, but I don't know how much. I found out last week that Palouse had built a bunch of new houses a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if the population growth in Palouse has trended differently than usual, if that was part of the 12%.
I think we're thinking the same thing, Haley. It's a small enough town that a dozen houses is gonna make a difference.
Something about a leak that they had or
Yeah,
something.
that makes sense.
Leaks, yeah.
There was some mention of a leak that they had that went unnoticed for a while too, I seem to recall.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't have specific data on that, but I was thinking that it was probably leaks, and it might be system-wide leaks, because I don't know, for several years now, Palouse's use has been kind of trending upward. And I think maybe it has to do with, there was a guy named Don Mayotte who used to be out there, and he was the guy that did everything. And he not only fixed leaks, he read the meters, and he ran the wastewater, he did everything. And he was an outstanding employee, and I think they're still building their way up to the capacity to have spare time to go out and find and fix the leaks. So I would expect that it might be leaks and it might be increased population, but I don't really know either way. Okay, well, let me see. I'm going to go back here again to this one. You can see that percentage change from 1992, Pullman is up 6% from 1992, while Moscow's down 4%. And what I was just saying about the difference between the two cities, something must be different between Pullman and Moscow. And what's different is the population changes in the two towns has been different over the course of the time since 1992. So the solid lines in this chart show the Pullman and Moscow populations since 1992. And you can see that Pullman population has grown 46% up to 2024. I don't have Moscow's population for 2024 yet. But in general, Pullman grew a little bit faster during the early part of the aughts. This is the year that a lot of people in Pullman have talked about the census being bad and miscounting people. These numbers are actual census data numbers on the tens, and then in between their estimates. So these last few years are just census estimates. But Pullman's population has grown a little bit more than Moscow's, and so that's reflected in the water use. Pullman's using more water than Moscow. Part of that, or a lot of that, has to do with there's more people in Pullman since then. If we take these numbers, population and pumping, and try to make a per capita chart, you can see what that looks like. And so this is a change in per person pumping since 1992. And you can see that Moscow's per person pumping has gone down 45% and Pullman's 38%. Again, there's a 1-year difference here because I don't have population for Moscow. But what you can see in this chart is somewhere around the 2002, 2003 area, Moscow starts to use less water fairly quickly, where Pullman, it takes a while for that to kick in. And this is kind of when Moscow started taking conservation seriously back in 2002, 3. I think that's when they passed their first conservation ordinance back then. Now, Pullman's been playing catch up since then, and recently they passed a new ordinance, and you're going to see in a minute how that's reflected in the numbers, where their new ordinance might be kicking in now, so things are going to catch up. So maybe the two cities will be closer to each other. Maybe you won't see. I may not have put that chart in here. This is a running total of year to date compared to 2023. So you can see early in the year, pumping was a little bit higher than in 2023. In May, a lot less pumping went on, and in June again. So running total, the pumping total was down for the year by June, and then slowly they gave back that savings to the end of the year and ended the year at 1.7% less than in 2023. Okay, this is the baseline versus non-baseline, or the equivalent to indoor versus outdoor. So about 2/3 of the water is used indoors and about 1/3 of the water is used outdoors. And aside for that is this chunk, the non-baseline water, is about the same amount of water that is going to be required, we think, to stabilize the lower aquifer. So if somehow all of the outdoor pumping were to go away tomorrow, then there's a good chance, at least it looks like there's a good chance, the aquifer would stabilize, at least until more people move into town, and then it would start to go down again. But that's on the order of what we think it's going to take to stabilize the lower aquifer. Okay, this is the baseline water use, which is the indoor water use. And it's changed from 2023. Pullman was up a little bit, Moscow was down a little bit. And so you can see when there's a difference in these two, then it seems like maybe something happened that was different in the two cities. So I don't know what happened in terms of conservation, who took advantage of it, how many people moved to town, how many people left town, what the student population was. So those all can play a role in that, but something different was going on between Pullman and Moscow there. And you can see Palouse used 3.9% less indoors last year. So that kind of takes you away from it being a leakage issue and thinking that maybe it is more population increase in Palouse. This is the non-baseline, and this is the outdoor water use, or a proxy for outdoor water use. And again, we see a difference between Moscow and Pullman. So Moscow pumped 4.7% more outdoors than they did in 2023. Pullman 3.7% less than they did in 2023. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Pullman passed that new ordinance, and the new ordinance not only dictated a lot of things, it dictated the every other day watering. And I think that that is starting to kick in, or is kicked in now in Pullman, where the first year the ordinance was passed, not everybody had understood what the rules were and were following the rules. But this year, a lot more folks in Pullman are following the rules. And so their pumping was less outdoors than in 2023, while Moscow's was more. And again, you see this thing, Haley, where the UI, if you don't take into account the treated wastewater, its pumping was 35% less, where if you just take into account the treated wastewater, it was only 2.4% less. So that was the big gap between UI in 2023 and 2024. Okay, targets. These targets were developed as part of the 1992 groundwater management plan. There were two targets, 125% of the average pumping back then, and another one which was called the 1% increase target. And you can see that the 125% ceiling has really never been approached by the aggregate of all the entities. So that ceiling has been met every year all the way. And this 1% increase target has actually been reported wrong. So it's been reported this way since 1997. And what they did was they just took the average pumping back then and took 1% of it and added that amount every year. So it's straight line. So it's really an increment and it's not an increase. And when you look at the wording in the groundwater management plan, you see that the 1% is supposed to be based on a 5-year moving average. And so that means every year is based upon the 5 previous years. So if you continue to do better and better, your target's going to continue to go down because you're using less water and you don't get to get that 1% that you were getting back when you were pumping a lot of water. And so if you say the 1% increment that you've been reporting all these years is incorrect, this blue line is what the target should have been over the years. And you can see how some years the target would be met and some years it would be exceeded. And that's a more meaningful target because it gives you something meaningful to shoot for. Okay, if you look from last year's presentation, this shows 1992 to 2023, and then it projects a 2024 target of 2.303 billion gallons. And the 2024 actual pumping was 2.24 billion gallons. So you met the target. You met the 2024 target, 1% target. So you met both the ceiling and the 1% target for 2024. But things have kind of changed since 1992. And in the water supply, supplemental supply analysis, you looked at demand conditions and how much water you were going to need. And you said you were going to need supplemental water to offset projected increases in water demand from population growth. And so the population is going to continue to grow, and you've got to provide water to offset that. At the same time, you said you were going to increase conservation. And if conservation was going to increase 15%, which is what I think the target was over this period, if you increased the conservation at the same rate that you increased the population, then the total demand would stay constant and you'd be able to meet the demand with increased conservation. So effectively, that becomes a 0% moving average target. So your target for the follow-on year is the average of the 5 previous years. So when you look at 2023, the 2024 target would have been 2.26 billion gallons. And again, 2024, the pumping was 2.24. So you squeaked by on the 0% target. So you'd actually met the target that you came for demand offset in the water supplemental water supply study. Now, if you look at 2025, the pumping target would be 2.25 million gallons. And so since this year, 2.24 million gallons were pumped, that means you have 10 million gallons you can pump more in 2025 than you did in 2024 before exceeding the target. So that's a pretty tight target, but it's more meaningful than that one that's way up in the sky for the 1% increment. Okay, water levels. This is a chart that shows 28 of the wells that are in the monitoring well network. It shows water level hydrographs, in some cases going back to 2006. We've got data going back to 2006. So if you want to get into the weeds on this one, Mike can provide this to you and you can look at individual wells. The map in the center will show you where the well is. You can see that there are basic trends of continually downward, that's a lower aquifer well, and then this downward with a recovery, that's an upper aquifer well. So I'll show you a couple of these wells in the upper and lower aquifer and talk a little bit more about those. Upper aquifer. This is Moscow well number 2. This is one of Moscow's upper aquifer pumping wells. It's the one it's at Jackson and A Street in that old building that used to have the water mural on the side. And you can see that water levels were continually declining until 2018. And at that point, Moscow quit basically pumping from the upper aquifer. And you can see when the pumping stopped from the upper aquifer, it started to recover. And water started recharging the aquifer, and the water levels since come back quite a bit. And it's continuing to come back. So the upper aquifer is recovering since Moscow isn't pumping out of it. This is the what we call a DOE well. It's the Pullman test well. It's out on Sunshine Road where Motley and Motley is, kind of between Pullman and Moscow. And you can see going back to 2006, there's a pretty steady decline in water level. And I spend a lot of time looking at this, and when I look at it long enough, I can kind of see things that may or may not be there in terms of kind of looks like this period is a little bit flatter than this period, and then this period is a little bit flatter than this period. But when you try to do linear regression on the short periods between like 1 year, 2 year periods, it doesn't work because the pumping mix makes the levels go high or low depending upon which pumps are on when. But if you look at a longer term regression, you can see some things in here. You can see that if you go for the rate of decline from 2006 up to 2018, when Moscow quit pumping from the upper aquifer, you can see that the decline was 0.67 feet per year. If you go from 2006 all the way out to 2024, you can see that the decline is up to 0.71 feet per year. And that's a small difference, but it is a difference. And I think that may be reflecting something that's going on since Moscow's quit pumping out of the upper aquifer. So I took a look at that, and this is Moscow's pumping. And the red line is the amount that they pump out of the upper aquifer. The blue line is what they pump out of the lower aquifer. You can see in 2018 in the summer when they quit pumping out of the upper aquifer, they went down to basically nothing. But in order to make up the water that they weren't getting, that they used to get from the upper aquifer, they had to pump more out of the lower aquifer. So you can see that up to 2018, they usually, or on average, pump 244 million out of the upper aquifer and 590 out of the lower aquifer. But since 2019, the upper aquifer's gone down to 7 million gallons. And I can't see that number, but you can see the lower aquifer has gone up a corresponding amount. So when you look at the difference in the pumping on average between 2006 and 18 and 2019 and 24, you can see that on average 172 million gallons more water is being pumped out of the upper aquifer. And I think that has a lot to do with why the water level decline is increasing. What's 172 million gallons equivalent to? Well, here's the 2024 pumping for UI and Palouse. So effectively, since Moscow got out of the upper aquifer, they've added a UI and Palouse to the lower aquifer. So what we should be expecting to see happen is the water level rate of decline, which had been going down, to either be steady or maybe increase a little in coming years, unless we either do a lot more conservation or get some supplemental water that keeps us from pumping on the lower aquifer. Okay, I tried to go through that way too fast, and I hope I didn't lose anybody, but if I did, do you have any questions I can answer?
Thanks, Steve. Always really appreciate that. That's seriously one of my favorite meeting agenda items of the year. Open the floor to any questions for Steve. I can kick off with one, Steve. I wonder, Steve, if there's the ability or if it's useful. We know how much Moscow was pumping from the upper aquifer. It may end up telling us something about any potential hydraulic intertie between upper and lower, and how that water migrates. If the increased pressure in the upper makes it the lower, but I guess more immediately, knowing that the impact, at least at this point, of that offset in pumping has resulted in about a 0.04 feet per year, potentially increased decline in the lower aquifer, that maybe that can help us confirm some of the math on our assumptions about the quantities needed for low aquifer stabilization?
I think maybe smarter people than me could maybe take a stab at that. But all these numbers that are really low, they're kind of in the weeds. It's close to being in the weeds. Like,
yeah,
what difference does enrollment at WSU make? Or, you know, if it's in the low single-digit percentages, it's really hard to piece out from such a complicated system.
That's probably true. There's enough noise in there that just getting outside the noise would be difficult, huh?
Yeah, it seems. And the number we came up with for how much it's going to take to stabilize the lower aquifer was, we got that by looking at the hydrographs, and some of the wells out on the edge of the aquifer system seem to flatten out in the winter. So they quit increasing in level, but they're not going down in level. So that kind of makes us believe that if we pumped what we pumped in the winter, maybe things would stabilize in closer to the pumping centers like they do out at the edge of the pumping centers. And so that's effectively saying if we pumped what we do in the winter all year round, that would probably stabilize the aquifer. And that's the target number that we came up for in the supplemental supply project.
Yeah. Any other questions for Steve? I've got another question / comment. It's gratifying to see the Pullman outdoor irrigation numbers. I know, we had the first kind of preliminary look last year that looked like it was a successful implementation, and super cool to see that continue. I know that was a huge lift for Sean and his staff, and also for Nathan and the electeds in Pullman. So it's really cool to see those numbers continue to pay dividends. That's awesome. We really look forward to seeing that continue. Sean, any comments on that or thoughts?
3.7. That's the only thing in my head right now was the percentage reduction since 23.
Awesome,
so
man. Yeah, that's a great story to tell.
Yeah, I think we can take that as a win for our outdoor irrigation ordinances. And I'm sure Councilmember Weller will reach the good word on that, as he does.
Fantastic. Any other questions for Steve?
Quick question. The Genesee well that they did, is that part of the Palouse Basin boundary? I can't remember.
No, not right now.
It's just outside.
The jury's still out, but at least one hydrologist told me definitively not. But the jury is still out. The Woods Hole people have not told us yet. They're geologists, and sometimes they're not in a hurry.
And
Great, thank you.
I have a similar on the same vein. I think I've asked this before. And Colfax is outside the boundary, right? Palouse is as far as we know.
Yes.
Okay.
Colfax had been included previously, Haley, but then we've gotten some pretty definitive data that indicates that they aren't. And so the most up-to-date boundary map does not include Colfax, but does include Palouse.
Cool, thank you.
That's blasted all over our social media.
Do we have any records for Genesee to see how that aquifer system is responding?
Yes, we do. We have they've drilled 2 new wells in the last 2 years. They haven't finished. I don't know if they've finished their second new well, but the first well that they did, they have an instrument down there that we get the data from. But it seems like there's something wrong with the instrument. And so the data that we've been getting is kind of freaky, if that's a scientific term.
I think so, Steve. Yeah.
And
If not, I've been offending a lot of scientists over the years.
Okay. In addition, the
short data
were analyzed on PBAC's dollar. It looks like, from what John Bush thinks and kind of what Kyle thinks too, because he did some analysis of that the rock layers are a little bit different in Genesee. So even though the rock is the same kind of rock, it probably didn't come in at the same time in the same places. So it's questionable if there are really connections between the rock there and the rock here.
Isn't it safe to say that there's nothing to suggest they're connected at this point? So we're looking for something that we don't really have data to suggest a connection right now.
That's my understanding.
That's how I would characterize it. Not
With
that they're
one
not.
exception, and the exception is that the water level there is roughly the same as the water level on the south end of the Palouse Basin. And it's hard to imagine how a water level would be the same in a place that doesn't pump very much than it would be in a place that pumps a lot, unless something's going on. But it could be that there's nothing going on and the water levels are just the same.
Okay. Any additional questions for Steve before we move on?
So real quick, Steve, I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much. I'm a data guy, so I really appreciate looking at that. I will echo what Sean has already said, that but from a different viewpoint, this will help when we talk to the citizens, how important this move has been, because I know it was a bit of a challenge at first, but obviously it was a good move. So thank you, Sean and staff, Kara, everybody. So, yeah.
Great.
So Steve, when you either send the final version or tell me the version you sent a couple weeks ago is final, then we'll get it up on the website.
Okay, will do.
This is Kara. I have one follow-up question and kind of got talked about. I know we pitched in some money for the logger or something out at Genesee, and Steve, it sounds like maybe it's not working well. Is there something we can do to make it work? I mean, is there something we should be doing? I know we contributed to that with the idea that we could track Genesee's water levels for a time, and I just want to make sure there's not something we can do to better that situation.
I guess we could ask them about that. I don't know how much it would cost for them to pull out that transducer and put a new one in. And, you know, I asked the guy that worked on that project, the engineer that worked on that project, what he thought, and he couldn't give me an explanation for what he thought was going on. And I don't think Genesee is really all that worried about what the water level is as long as there's water over the top of their pumps. And so it's basically us getting the information, and I would guess that they would say, if you want the information, then next time we go down for some other reason, we'll be able to pull it and you can pay to get it fixed. But I don't know what would happen. I guess we can ask them.
Okay.
They also have a new well that they're drilling, and I don't think they would need to be using both wells at the same time. And I don't know if maybe Daniel or IDWR or somebody might be interested in putting a logger in their new well, and we can see how the numbers from the new well compare to what's in the existing well, and we can from there judge whether the existing well transducer is bad or it's just a flaky aquifer system.
Okay.
Yeah, folks, this is Dan Sturgis with Department of Water Resources. We're waiting on the second well to be completed to see what the construction characteristics are, you know, the depth and total diameter and things. And I do have instrumentation to go in either that well or their first well, and we'll see how it behaves. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. We can take care of that on our end. And so, like I said, I already have the instrumentation for it.
And Daniel, that's data I'm assuming that y'all would be willing to share with us.
100%.
Sweet, thanks, man.
You bet.
All right. Well, Steve, a million thanks. Really appreciate it. This is really critical component of our work. And so we'll get this distributed, get it out to everybody. And then we'll have some conversations. We had some preliminary conversations in our communication subcommittee about messaging on this. And we'll be coordinating and cooperating on messaging so that we can have a good congruent message going out from the committee and to all of our respective communities. Really some positive messaging to go out. So we'll be working with everybody on that as well. With that, I'm going to move on to item B under our presentations and discussions, which is our water conservation outreach and education in Latah County. Aaron?
So we have been properly hitting the ground running with outreach. I've been told numerous times that this is not the outreach season. That has not corresponded with me. We've got plenty to go around essentially till May. So far we've done 4 outreach programs at the co-op, 2 at the library, and then 1 at the Troy Library. And they've really hit like a big broad range of ages, anywhere from 0 to 84. And the messaging has been like decently positive. People are really interested. I will say now that we have newspapers talking about our recharge, that's like definitely a huge question that I'm getting a lot more, but still very positive. They're just more interested in what's going on. So I've been appropriately kind of communicating what we are doing in a way that's, you know, still not finite, because we have, you know, some official things to hammer out before we put those out, like Tyler was saying. So total, we have about 25 to 30 more events going forward till the end of my term, and that includes all of our tabling events. We're still decently in Latah County. My goal is to try to bridge out to Whitman County, and we met with the mayor last week of Palouse, and he's interested in kind of getting us into some community events as well. And my second point is going to be the Pullman Library. That seems like a no-brainer. They do a lot of events there. I think it's just a matter of scheduling and manpower. So yeah, that's pretty much the best I've got right now. All ages range, but the majority of it's going to be like youth, but adult is, I've been getting feedback that, you know, we might be interested in doing some more adult programming going forward that's not just geared towards the state of the aquifer, which I think will probably, as we start publicizing some of our stuff, I anticipate that we're gonna have more of those talks again in the summer with like city council or the food co-op board, places along those lines, but it's looking great on my end. It's been really positive.
Excellent.
So I'll add a couple things. So I've told Erin she's gonna have to start saying no probably pretty soon. She's already fully booked and she's got a lot of time left. She's also really started a nice, strong social media program. And we've got more ideas for that than there are hours in the day to do. And she is doing a lot of youth and kid events. But when you get the kids, you get their parents. And the event in Troy yesterday was a youth event, and the age range was 14 to 86. So
No kids showed up, so it was all adults, but it ended up being a very fruitful discussion.
so it's a successful. She's really getting the word out there, and she is well spoken as far as the questions that are coming out.
Excellent. Counselor Lewis?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, as we've been talking about Genesee, so Troy's in the aquifer footprint, to our knowledge, right? Are we tracking? No, is it more just community awareness thing? Or is it just a general interest on water conservation? Cause I love if we're hitting the footprint outside of the known aquifer, footprint basin. But if Troy's outside of it, was it just a general interest request? How'd we get that one?
There was money that was entrusted to PBAC. Commissioner Lamar played a key role in wanting to ramp up increased conservation education in the county. And so the county funded conservation efforts throughout Latah County.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you. But then I was like, man, I kind of want to be, if we're getting the chance to be, I was gonna say nosy, but inquire and observe Genesee data. I wonder if Troy's would give us any other context, but more data and more events than we have time to crunch. I love it.
Commissioner Lamar, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just had a question about Palouse. Do they require meters in their homes? Do we know?
Yeah. Yes, their culinary water system is metered. Yes.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the connection between potential increased water use and the education component that we just heard about in Palouse. So I was just trying to see if there's any possibility for linkages with respect to metering.
Well, we haven't really, it's still like really in its infancy as far as like what type of activity, like education we're gonna be giving. They do want to do a youth and adult. As far as like the outreach I'm trying to present, it's very pragmatic. So if there's a way to like kind of marry those two, I'd be more than happy to do that. We haven't really begun kind of drafting out that educational outreach just yet.
Luke, was there something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so Luke with Idaho Rural Water Association, we provide technical assistance to really small water systems and ones that are in remote areas. And a part of my job is to do a lot of this education and outreach. So if you're ever lacking on the manpower to fulfill these deliverables and do education and outreach, I'm here as a resource to assist in those things. So I can leave my contact information in the chat. If you ever need, an extra set of hands, just there as additional support.
Great. Thank you, Luke. Really appreciate it. Counselor Lewis?
Thank you. Sorry. I also just thought, Aaron, I can't, because you're full-time through the summer, right? Am I making that up?
My end date is August 31st.
I was gonna say, and Tyler is aware of my deep love for Rendezvous in the Park. I can send you a note. It could be really cool if we find a good water activity. Rendezvous is in July in Moscow, and it's STEAM-based youth outreach 2-day program outdoors at East City Park, and that could be a really cool one. Might be double dipping with some students that we've already talked to, but that could be cool. And I had another question and it's gone, so I will think of it and throw my hand back up when it pops back in my head.
Yeah, I've
Oh,
already
no,
got
I do
that.
remember. I'm sorry, I do remember. It's tied to the meter question that Tom asked. And I don't know if our Washington folks can help answer. Does Washington require meters by law in residential? I can't remember. I'm seeing a nod.
Yes, I know WSU is delinquent in that regard, getting 100% meter, we're pretty darn close. But I think the legislation was by 2017, I think all Class A water systems had to be fully metered.
I see the
Yeah,
nod.
we've got Director Wells nodding. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the report, Aaron, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our subcommittee reports. We're going to start with our Clearwater River RFQ. We've already covered this in part with the introductions that we did. We are working with HDR, the selected consultant, on scope and budget, and so we hope to get that moved through. The steps in that process is once we get that negotiated, we've got our subcommittee that's working on that. We'll get that negotiated. When we feel like we've got that where it's acceptable, then we will bring that in front of the committee for approval of that scope and budget. And once the committee has approved that scope and budget, then it'll go to Moscow City Council for final approval, and then that'll be in place and we will start work on that. So that's really exciting. We've had some preliminary meetings in preparation. We've had 2 meetings with the city of Lewiston now. Their mayor had expressed some interest in what our project entailed, as they also have a diversion down on the Clearwater. So Moscow's mayor, myself, the city administrator from Moscow, we all went down and met with the mayor of Lewiston, his staff, and really appreciated Michelle and the representatives from Idaho Division of Water Resources. We also had representation from the Department of Environmental Quality, and was facilitated by the governor's office. Big thanks to Jake for that one. So yeah, really good productive meeting that we had with them. And then Mike and I had a follow-up meeting with their technical staff to take a look at their project. They're building a new diversion from the Clearwater River, and to have a preliminary discussion about any potential for collaboration. And so we included that in our conversation with HDR about scoping, so that we can have those conversations with them and explore if there's any opportunities for cost savings by collaboration. Mike, anything else on the Clearwater that I'm not hitting?
We're moving forward.
It's exciting. Does anyone have any questions?
You think you'll have that ready for next month's meeting?
Yes.
Good.
And
Yep.
the only color I was gonna add, in general, I was gonna say, I don't have any concern about this going well with council. All 6 members of Moscow City Council are super on board with the water conversation. So that's, I know it's not always a given when staff and or other agencies are bringing forward proposals, but I think this will be a pretty easy one that'll win hearts and minds. So just wanted to share. We know it's not always a given in the political climate, but I am not anticipating any surprises.
Thanks, Haley. Budget, Rusty.
No budget updates for this month. We're very marginal transactions, just primarily expected costs with salaries and budget.
Excellent. Thanks, Rusty.
I do have a budget question.
Yeah, go ahead, Haley.
And with 2 states in the room, I don't know if we've got contrasting thoughts. I don't know that we are getting questions based on the federal funding conversations. I have not had any from citizens yet, but is there a clear answer for us to say the money for the projects that we're talking about, including the RFQ, are they at risk for any federal pauses or freezing? Because my understanding was a lot of these conversations and funding for projects and studies were like, it's allocated from cash in hand, right? It's not necessarily
Yeah,
about?
I think I understand what you're asking, Haley. The funding for our current phase of this project is we have money in PBAC's existing budget that we have earmarked for this project, and the remaining funds, the 182,500, is money from the state, from the Idaho Water Resource Board, and that is money that is in hand in the state budget.
Great.
So the longer term funding, that's something that we're not at that juncture yet. So whether, that is something we want to continually encourage funding for programs like WIFIA on the federal level that could be part of a funding package for this. But all of our funding at this point is local and state, and that is not in jeopardy.
That helps. So I will not borrow tomorrow's troubles today then.
Yep.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Excuse me. Communication Subcommittee. Pardon me. We had a good meeting. Met on March 18th. We discussed a lot of the upcoming outreach that we have on the docket. We discussed dates for our SEG and our research colloquium. Our commitments to both of those groups was that our next touch point would be when we had a contract in place for a consultant, so that we could use that as an introductory opportunity with the consultant. And so we will, as we get to the point that we've got the schedule, the scope and budget hammered out, and we've got it scheduled for both this body, which we anticipate being next month's meeting, and then Moscow City Council immediately thereafter, then we'll have the confidence to move forward and put dates on a budget for the SEG. We'll have the meeting with the SEG, where we discussed doing some outreach to the research group that we have for the colloquium and gauging their preference for whether we do that during the summer, or if we wait for the fall for the semester to start, when a lot of the academics will be back in the office, and so they may want to engage there. So we just want to gauge preference when we think we'll get participation from those groups. And then we also had made a commitment to have another touch point with the Nez Perce Tribe Executive Council once we have that consultant on board, to go down and have an introductory meeting with them as well. So those will be the three major touch points that we have coming up. We also discussed just the coordination that we'll need on the messaging, and we'll be moving that forward. Mike, Aaron, you want to talk about your meeting with the city of Palouse?
Yeah, so they approached, I don't know if it was, they reached out to Paul or Paul reached out to him. I'm not really sure how.
Paul helped us get a meeting with the mayor of the city of Palouse.
And he was really interested in us getting some outreach into their community spaces. They are like a pretty teeny town, and they're limited as far as like third-party meeting places, but there's a couple areas that they think PBAC's messaging and outreach would go swimmingly, and we're gonna try to connect with them going forward, and hopefully have a better collaborating partnership. They make up a lot of, Washington makes up the half, the other half of this, and a lot of our outreach is in Moscow, so he was super open to the idea.
So additionally, he's considering appointing people to represent the city in the stakeholder engagement group. And he is open to discussion of creating a formal relationship with PBAC. And since it came up, I looked what would that look like? So this would potentially, if we went forward with that conversation, it would be adding an entity, which in the interstate agreement is a party to the agreement, and that would require a unanimous vote plus an addendum to the interstate agreement if it came to that.
Some of you who've been around for a while recall that the city of Palouse used to make a voluntary financial contribution to the committee. I believe it was $2,000, which was kind of a set amount for a long time, if I remember right. But that's been several years ago, and so yeah, we do have provisions within our bylaws that do allow for us to add a pumping entity if that's something that they're interested in doing. So we can cross that bridge. Is that any questions for the communication subcommittee? All right, we're gonna move on to technical. Jeff?
Technical, we canceled the meeting this month again, as we just didn't have anything urgent. However, we've got kind of an agenda forming for next month. We're gonna try to loop back with Dr. Langman, see where he's at. I think Mike's been in touch with him. He can update that on it. Well, actually, good time as any. Jeff, I think, is getting started on his
He's
effort.
doing some pre-work, he's doing some GIS work, is recruiting a grad student as a second grad student, if that one falls through. And he's on track.
He was doing some GIS work, trying to identify potential
He's-
well locations. and
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So he's on track.
So yeah, there's that effort, and then we're just, we'll, sure it'll come up in the executive meeting, but we're gonna talk about how we can best support some of the other efforts, and so we'll be meeting next month, and I'll have a little more of an update.
Excellent. Any questions for Jeff or technical? All right. Other reports and announcements, I'll start with one. Just a big congratulations to Lana. She's been promoted to research scientist by the U of I, and that's in recognition of her extensive scientific background. Congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't know anybody knew about that. I was trying to
we've-
keep it on the DL.
We follow your career with bated breath, Lana.
Thank you.
All right, any other announcements or reports? All right, our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 17th at 2 p.m. We look forward to seeing everyone there, and we hope to have a vote on a scope and budget, which is just super, super exciting. So at this point, we will go ahead and recess to executive session. So just voting members of the committee, please stay, and everyone else is excused, and thank you for your time today.
And Tyler, we will not reconvene after the executive session.
We'll reconvene just to adjourn.
Yeah, yes.
We have to go into recess, Haley, and so we'll reconvene the meeting just to formally adjourn the meeting is what we'll do.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm happy to say my hat now has a buddy.
Oh, look at that.
Well loved.
Yeah, you got some twins.
Don't get them confused there, yeah.
This almost looked like he waxed the hat.
Those are those hats that, like, you know, it's a good hat when it seems like it's more fused than formed to somebody's head. Like, that's a good hat.
Use a little, won't fit anyone else, you know, it's yours.
No, I don't know how to work without it.
I was down at a bar in Kendrick and having a beer, and there's these two old timers that were sitting at the bar. You could tell they probably met there every day for the last who knows how long.
Years.
And the one, they were talking to each other, and I went up to the one guy and I asked him, because he had this just a black felt hat that was just, yeah, he was just had him. This thing it had seen some stuff, and I said, man, that's a great hat. And he said, you know, some Chris Ledoux type line or whichever the old country song, you know, many men tried to take this hat off my head kind of a thing. And his buddy goes, that's one of them crush hats. And he goes, yeah, it sure is. He goes, man, you can't get them no more. And the other buddy goes, yeah. And he goes, you know, I used to have a crush hat like that. It was red. It was my hunting hat. Man, I love that hat. I love that hat. And one day I went out hunting with my father-in-law, and that son bitch, every time he said my father-in-law, I said, that son bitch. He goes, my father-in-law, that son bitch. He said, hey, that's a pretty nice crush hat. And he goes, yeah, I love this hat. It's my hunting hat as well. And he had this brand new 44 mag revolver. And he had that on his hip. And he says, why don't you throw that hat in the air? And I bet you I can shoot it right in the air. And I said, like, hell you can, you son of a bitch. There's no way you can shoot this hat in the air. So I took off my crush hat and I threw it in the air. And my father-in-law, that son of a bitch, he pulled that 44 mag out. He waited till it hit the ground. Then he unloaded that gun into that hat. And then he just got genuinely sad. He goes, you know, I can't, I can never get one of these hats again. And the other guy goes back to the start and goes, yep, them are good crush hats. This is just freaking awesome.
Reading a lot with your elbows up for most of the meeting.
Okay,
Tyler, I have a logistics question. Do we need to stop recording for executive session? I don't remember if we.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should
Did you
stop recording for that.
Oh, thank you.
We're part of executive.
Yes, you
And
guys
I
are
just have
voting
to,
members.
I only have about 5 minutes before my next meeting, so just let me know.
No, you're on the committee.
Don't let him convince you otherwise.
All right.
I've been cleaning my glasses for 2 hours now.
We are going to call our meeting back to order and come out of executive session. Appreciate everybody's participation. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we're done. Thanks, everybody.
You know, Tyler, just.
Hi,
a
guys.
thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Hey, guys. He may be getting negative just because of the wave.
I was gonna ask Chuck about the.
Yeah.
That might be the single.
Are we
Just
on?
because of what?
Oh,
This way.
Mike, are we
Well, that was
done?
what I was
Mike,
wondering.
we stop the recording.
Yeah. I don't mean to continue, but I'm just thinking, you know, root cause is usually very helpful in determining if it's